does it communicate eventually to job costing or just lump sums over to QuickBooks? That would be one question. And two, are you uh, entering costs based on POs or actual costs? And your labor, I think you were talking about that. You have to divide that amongst all the jobs. Who's doing that? I mean, that gets pretty complex at some
Well,
point,
actually,
sounds like.
it actually doesn't. So to answer your question, we use like the Craftsman Book Company unit cost estimating system is basically what I have in BuilderTrend. I spent time to build that catalog out specifically for us. So you have your cost codes, which would be like demolition labor, you know, framing materials, all those things, and they're all separated out. So first up was figuring out like what are the categories we need, and then we uploaded, a cost book that ties to each of those cost codes. So, if we're framing a certain amount of linear foot of wall or hanging a certain amount of square foot of drywall or whatever it is that I have in-house labor for, those things are a unit cost and it's based project and we're adjusting those up. So those all feed into QuickBooks is like one cost. And so that's why you still need BuilderTrend, because BuilderTrend has the budget tab, which is where you essentially read the project's budget. And so it'll take all those line items and group it into, a category essentially. So framing labor, let's say. From there, if we're doing things internally, we have our burdened rate for our staff entered into BuilderTrend, and they're using that BuilderTrend time clock, and they're clocking into the line item that they're doing for the day. So if they're framing, they're clocking into framing labor. That is then tracking in BuilderTrend for that specific job against that line item. And it tells me, in real time, if I had 5 guys clocked in it over the course of 2 weeks for different hours, like it'll tell me the individual time and the overall time and the money we spent for that. If we're using subs, the PO system is what comes in for them. So at the beginning of the project, when we're estimating the project, we send out bids through the bid system in BuilderTrend. We then enter that bid into the estimate, and then that gets turned into a purchase order, and then it's tracked against for bills. So essentially the project manager is creating the purchase order and sending it to the subcontractor, and that subcontractor approves that. And then as payments are made by our finance manager, she's going in and tracking the payment amounts in that purchase order until it's paid in full and approved. And then,
Do you, just a quick question, do you do accurate work in process?
like a whipped report. So
Yep.
that's the
Yep.
reason that we started getting into like Monday. That was one of the reasons we started getting into Monday, is
Okay.
because BuilderTrend's reporting is terrible. That's just the reality. Like I could go into my whip report today and it wouldn't tell me anything I need to know, and it's inaccurate.
So few people use WIP or use it
Yeah.
correctly, and all I can say is you never ever know.
Yeah.
Your financials are
Yeah.
not correct.
Yes.
They just aren't.
No, they're not. Especially as a construction company. And the second problem with that is most accountants don't even understand what our reporting procedures need to be. Oh,
Well, our mutual friend Alex, who introduced
yeah.
us to you, has a very accurate has WIP reporting that was sufficient for bonding
Yeah.
companies. And when you're doing that now, they want to know what you should
Yeah,
want to know,
totally.
and it's
Yeah.
great.
So I actually have we haven't fully solved that problem yet. So what I currently have is a financial sheet that I created with Google Sheets, and I get a cash report every week. So my cash reports are in there. It tells me, amount we collected, our outlays for overhead, our outlays for job costs, actual cash balance. That automatically calculates our net and gross burn rates and gives me a cash runway for, giving me an idea of like how much cash we have on hand. I also have essentially a overhead and markup sheet that I would say I created for projecting what we're trying to do for the year. So it has all the line items that are on my chart of accounts. So like accounting, software, salary for office, salary for project management, salary for sales, like all the expenses that we would have from an overhead standpoint get entered in there and forecasted as a budget. And then we track against that month over month in that sheet. And it tells me if we're using too much or not enough of that budget, if we're off. And then I also enter like our projected revenue in there, and it gives me what we should be marking things up based on our desired net profit and anticipated job costs, and a whole bunch of like other information.
Yeah.
Wow, it's brilliant.
Yeah. And
We
Brilliant.
need to have another podcast session here.
Well, and I knew this would happen, but I think the message that I really want to get across here is that you, just from what you've described, you have a leverage that a lot of contractors do not have against the competition. And it's only going to continue to compound over time. Right. Because you have this in place.
Yeah. And I've taken a different approach, right? Like my first couple years in business, I never knew where I was going to go, right? Like when I started this, it wasn't anticipated. When I did start, all of a sudden I went, I think like my first 6 months in business, we did like 150,000. My first full year, we did 500,000. My second full year, we were over $1 million. And at that point, like I was just hiring people and trying to get them in to work alongside me and get things done. And what I learned is like, you have to have systems for growth. And now, we've been at a similar revenue level of, what I was doing 3 years ago for the last 3 years. But I have so many systems and this great foundation that when I'm ready to pull the trigger, like growth will be a breeze for us from here on out.
Yeah. It's truly scalable.
Exactly. And that's what I'm looking
truly
for.
Scalable.